What's up everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today in this video for the First Descendant, we are closing the loop on the King's Guard lance. A couple of days ago I made a video when I was still busy building it, and I said I was going to be testing a couple of different things, and essentially I want to bring you the complete product today in this video, basically how I'm using the King's Guard lance, and also want to just share a couple of findings regarding the weapon, which Descendants benefit most from using it, and just generally whether this is a good gun that you need to be spending catalysts and all kinds of things on to unlock further. Let's go. So first things first, the King's Guard lance is one of a handful of weapons which was recently touched by a patch and essentially made a lot better. Now, just how much better the King's Guard lance is versus the one that we have now versus what we had before is basically a night and day difference, since there's two big major differences. First and foremost, the lance that you can spawn, aka the turret, you can now drop 3 of those instead of just 1, which is a huge boost to the weapon overall. And basically this is what creates a situation where this becomes such a fantastic area denial system and basically a handheld version of Jaber. Now, this 3-pylon version of King's Guard lance is available without having to sacrifice any additional copies into it. So a base 0 version of the King's Guard lance can do this. And this is a big move, because the point is that this means that this is a fantastic weapon for you to get hold of really early on in the game, and then essentially help you to level up Descendants, which might not necessarily be very good at mobbing at the beginning, because mobbing at the beginning is super important for you to be able to level up really fast. The second thing that is a big change is basically how they change the additional levels of King's Guard lance being sacrificed into this weapon to create a 4 out of 4, which you see in front of you here right now. Primarily what happens is this affects the damage ranges and the maximum damage range, and this increases with every level that you put into the King's Guard lance. Furthermore, you also have the functionality in the weapon that as long as you keep shooting it, doesn't matter how many times you have to reload your King's Guard lance, as long as you keep shooting the turrets, you can keep them up indefinitely. This means that you can set up 3 turrets and you can have the same 3 turrets for 30 fucking minutes if you want to, as long as you keep on reloading them by shooting them with the actual weapon itself, thereby sort of building up charge again. Now, as I show some footage of the weapon in just a bit, you'll understand more of what I mean if what I'm explaining right now doesn't make a lot of sense to you. But let's first talk about whether this weapon is a good weapon for you to spend time and resources on to fully develop. In other words, to fully catalyze and essentially get every single one of these mod slots filled and leveled and basically ready to go. Now, to answer that question is not necessarily that easy, and primarily it's because of 2 reasons. First of all, of course, this is a weapon that got a major boost, so it is being mentioned a lot on YouTube right now, and it's certainly getting its glow up, and that certainly does make the weapon seem excessively good. And I would say in certain niche situations it is a fantastic weapon, and certainly one that I carry on a lot of my Descendants right now. But it is super important to know one big thing, and that is that this is by no means a weapon that you will be using to do bossing with. Are you capable of doing bossing with this weapon? Absolutely. You can also do bossing with a fucking wet pillow, but it doesn't mean that you should or want to, because it'll just take that long to actually kill the boss. There are certainly much better options in terms of bossing weapons, like Enduring Legacy. You've got your snipers. I mean, I would say Secret Garden is a better bossing weapon than this weapon, and Secret Garden, in my opinion, is also not a bossing weapon, but there are certainly better weapons suited for attacking bosses, Thunder Cage, for example, and so on, that are suited for when you do Void Intercept bosses. However, the thing that makes King's Guard lance truly unique is the fact that it essentially enables every single one of your Descendants to mob extremely easy. And this is a very important point, because a lot of the times when we talk about the King's Guard lance, and what I've seen happening on YouTube is that people will simply reply to this and say, yeah, but you know, why don't you just use fucking Bunny? Bunny does this shit better, and I would just use Bunny. But see, that's the whole thing. This weapon can essentially turn every character into a bunny, and that is super important for certain descendants. Let me give you a few examples. Kyle, for example, is one of the descendants that is relatively difficult, especially at the beginning, to mob with, and arguably is still, even when fully kitted out, not necessarily your best choice for killing large amounts of enemies super fast. Yes, I know there are ways of doing that, but it requires a serious amount of investment in the descendant. But let's say, for example, you've just picked up Kyle and you want to be able to level Kyle as fast as possible, at the very least to 40, at least a couple of times to 40, while you start leveling up out some of his catalyst slots. So in this case, the point is, you can very easily do mobbing based farming, which is generally left for characters like Valby and Viessa and Bunny and so on, and generally that you would have to have one of those characters in your party to assist you. You don't need that anymore. So this is the very, very famous farm on Vespers, which is generally considered a team farm, and all we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and set ourselves up right here. And we're going to juice up our towers. You can see there, they are fully loaded. And now we're going to walk on over to this thing here and we're going to start it up. It's probably going to require 2 charges because my dude is really not in a good place. But now you'll see, once this spawns, it's basically just going to murder out everything without me having to fire a single shot. And I can do the standard reset farm, which is this area is quite known for. And I can just do this by myself. Now, this is still faster in a group, of course, but this gives you the option of doing this yourself if you wanted to. This is a game changer for characters or descendants like Kyle, who basically struggle with this sort of thing. Another good example is Hailey. Super good at dealing a shitload of damage to a single target or 1 or 2 targets at a time, but not necessarily the best at mobbing. Once again, not a problem. You can set up in this super famous spot, which requires, of course, chill. We can get our towers out and we can go enable the tower. Doop, doop, doop. And I might need to do 2 shots. I might as well just hit it with this and shabram. And now it's going to spawn the enemies and they're just going to get absolutely blasted by this. And this is once again a fantastic way for you to just farm. Okay, so let's talk setup and basically how it all comes together. So let's just quickly go back to the actual stats of the King's Guard Lance. Now, by default, its critical hit rate, critical hit damage, and weak point damage are super low. And stacking weak point damage makes no sense on this weapon since the turrets themselves don't inflict weak point damage hits, so it is a completely redundant thing to stack on this weapon because it would only really count for when you actually shoot the laser beam at something, which is entirely not the points of using the King's Guard Lance. So that leaves us with being able to stack critical hit rate and critical hit damage. And again, there will be people in the comments saying, yeah, but it's so fucking low, you should be stacking other things and so on. There isn't really anything else to stack. You either have to flavor a weapon towards elemental damage and crit hit damage, or you have to go weak point and elemental damage, or you have to go crit hit damage, crit hit and weak point, or it's like a combination of those. But generally speaking, if you're not taking weak point, you need to be taking crit because you need to be getting some damage at least. The point is this: these turrets shoot super fast and you will be seeing crits from them, and more specifically, we will actually be building it in such a way through an interaction with one of the mods that you can use for this, that it will be critting a shitload. So don't let the fact that it has very low crit hit rate at the beginning before we start dissuade you from it in any way. Looking at the mods that I settled up on, we have this configuration over here, but maybe we just take a quick step back and we just talk about the substats that you should be focusing on the King's Guard Lance. So as mentioned, crit hit rate and crit hit damage is good for us because we are going to be stacking crit hit, and so therefore we are going to be seeing a lot of crits happening, and so we want to get that as high as possible, and we want to get the damage that we get from that as high as possible. Firearm attack is also super important for us because the overall firearm attack of the weapon is what actually establishes the baseline for the damage, so we do have to take firearm attack as well. And then at this point in time, that leaves us with a 4th available slot, which we should be choosing an element for. This weapon is super suited for that because the element also increases the base damage, but furthermore, the elements all add unique flavor to what the turrets, the lances, essentially do. Now, we have 4 elements in the game. From a gun perspective, we of course have chill, we have fire, we have toxic, and we have lightning. Lightning is the least useful one out of the bunch here, because the lightning essentially has a debuff which lowers the defense of an enemy, but you cannot keep lowering the defense of an enemy. So it's going to be a one-time debuff, and maybe if you're one of those people that intends on using this against bosses or something like that, there's got to be one or two of you guys out there, then maybe you could consider using that. That leaves us with toxic, ice, and fire, and technically speaking, all three of those are equally good and equally bad, if I can put it that way. The bottom line is this: if you're looking for something that has a little bit more utility built into it, then chill is good, because chill actually inflicts a status as well, which freezes the enemy, and therefore you can get a little bit of control out of the situation as well. And if you are fighting enemies which last a little bit longer than the first couple of pulses from a lance, this can actually stop them from walking out of the circle, which means you can hit them with other abilities and skills, or they can basically die to more fire from the lances. If you choose the two dot elements which are available to you, which is fire and toxic, then of course you have the fact that you can load more dots onto the enemy, and then even if it wanders out of the circle, or basically as those dots keep stacking up, it'll just take progressively more damage. So I would say that if you want slightly more utility and control, you should go for chill, and if you want more overall damage, absolutely fire and toxic is your best options, with toxic being probably the best out of those two. Nonetheless, you can see here that I chose chill attack because I built the chill version of this weapon, and essentially this, again, as mentioned, is what I ended up with. Now I will show you a toxic version of this as well, just so you can understand it. But basically we have some staples on here, which is on every single gun, which is action, reaction, rifling reinforcement, and fire rate up. Those three should be on every single weapon in the game, except for sniper rifles and probably launchers. But the point is that those three are very big staples in terms of just elevating your damage profile. You might not think that fire rate up matters on this weapon since it's the lances doing the damage, but it actually affects the attack, the ping rate, the attack speed of the lances by stacking more fire rate into this. So super important mod to put on. Then we're going to just give ourselves more crit hit, and we're going to give ourselves more crit hit damage, because we're trying to elevate those two as high as we can on the weapon, and then we're going to just further on push it through the roof. Then we're going to add our element enhancement. So in the case of me using chill, I will add chill enhancement. If you decide to use toxic, you will add toxic enhancement. And then we have some additional critical hit damage for us here in the way of concentration priority, because again, we will be critting a lot, so we want those crits to be nice and juicy, nice and chunky, and so concentration priority helps us here. But it comes unfortunately with a drawback where it makes us reload slower. Then we are also, because once again we are going chill with this, we are also taking chill priority, so further on just increasing our chill attack even more, but again negatively influencing our reload time modifier. So therefore reload expert is a good option to add in here, because this is actually just going to give us back a little bit of that negative that we had. So not completely erasing it, but almost basically erasing one of these two mods, which just overall makes the gun feel a little bit like less cumbersome to use. The reload is super long with like negative 60%, so this does make it a little bit better. But I will say this, either which way, you won't really be having any issues with keeping your lances up or anything like that, and the reload time is not that bad. Plus you can kind of like cancel reload it as well, which is something that people do with Enduring Legacy, so it works here as well. And then that brings us to, I would imagine, what I guess you could call the thing that makes this work. Now, the gun works fine, the lances work fine, just as the way that it is, all right? But lethal finish is really the thing that makes it tick. And let me demonstrate why. So firstly, I'm going to take lethal finish off, okay? And we are over here in the lab, and I'm just going to go ahead and drop in some level 100 enemies for us here. And we're just gonna get like fucking 9 of them, so they can like stand like a nice group of them. What the hell just happened? So they can stand like a nice group of them together, and we can sort of like overlap them with turrets. So now, first things first, I'm gonna go ahead and drop one over here, and you're gonna see, boop, I'm gonna just boost it up. It's gonna be at its maximum size now, and you're gonna see there's gonna be some crits that filter in and so on. It's nothing spectacular. It's kind of cute, but it's not exactly blowing your hair back. Now, this is where that mod comes in. So let me quickly just go ahead and reset us here and eliminate. Okay, and then we go back in, and sorry guys, I'm perspiring in here. So we'll go ultimate and we'll get lethal finish up in here. Now let's first read what lethal finish says. It says that when firing a firearm ammo with an additional plus 60%, this is additive by the way, critical hit rate is fired on a cooldown of 15 seconds. This cooldown is important. You must remember it for just now. When defeating an enemy with enhanced bullets, module cooldown is minus 12.4 seconds. That doesn't matter. And however, the firearm's base weak point damage is fixed at 100%. That doesn't matter because we don't care about that. We only care about that first part of lethal finish. All right. So let's quickly see what the difference is here. Now, we need to, of course, spawn our victims again. So we'll drop this out here. And we're going to go ahead and throw the sucker up. And now, lo and behold, god damn, it is critting all the time. And that is because these lances employ something in this game called snapshotting, and you oftentimes see it in games of this kind where damage is calculated on a specific weapon or an ability or something like that. And basically when you load buffs onto it and then trigger the weapon or trigger the ability, then it snapshots all of the buffs that you have on you currently and produces an effect based on that snapshot. Now, this is exactly how these lances work. Basically, what we've done now is we've shot that very first shot, and that has triggered a boost in our critical hit rate, and that now gets snapshotted. And from now on, as long as we keep this turret over here alive, we will always be critting. And so now you can see, always be critting. All right. Well, then you might be saying to me, my guy, that is all cool and well that you have crits on one of the lances, but we have 3. How do we make sure that we get crits on all 3 lances? Well, that's where the cooldown timer of 15 seconds come in. So let me demonstrate. Let me just get a little spot timer thing out here quickly. So we're going to drop one down immediately. That's critting. So we're going to activate this bad boy. And when this thing hits 13, we should start seeing some crits rolling into this second one over here as well. We'll just juice this one up. That one's currently critting. This one is still busy working up. And right about now, boom, funk soul brother. So this is the point though. If you want to use this method to basically crit enable all of your 3 lances, then all you need to do is place one. Well, you can place all 3 down in whichever area, and then as soon as the cooldown comes off on it, then it will basically activate all of them in sequence. So you'll possibly have to spend 45 seconds waiting for all 3 to come online, or turret number 2 and 3 could potentially, if they both fire at exactly the right time, come online at the same time. But this is the reason, this exactly here is the reason why lethal finish is the superior mod to use. Now, I will say this. There are a ton of other mods which I tried and which I experimented with, and all of them basically do the same thing. All of them work with this snapshot mechanic. So, like for example, we have mental focus. Let me just move my face over here. Mental focus is another one of these where essentially you build stacks up. That also works with snapshotting here. Sweeping squad also works with snapshotting if you can time it right. So does what is a good one? Another good one. There should be one more, a really good one. Sharp precision shot also works with this. However, in the cases that I found where these 3 could potentially be better, the upkeep of them and managing the cooldowns and everything like that and getting it ready every time for placing down a new turret is arguably not worth the effort than it is just to set it up this way that we just did with lethal finish, because it's super easy and it kind of like just takes care of itself. And after you have your 3 turrets ready to go, you can essentially just fucking spend your time keeping them up, and you've got no problem. Now, if you wanted to set up other elements, of course, just to give you an idea, the only ones that you'd really swap is you'd swap your enhancement, you'd swap your priority, and then you'd put in your reload in there again. I just ran out of some module capacity there, but the point is that that's essentially what you would do. But like I said, in the end, I ended up setting it up this way. And I'm actually going to be showing some footage in the background right now of me just fighting against just a normal end of infiltration boss. And while this isn't the fastest kill, the fact is that you are locking the enemy down a lot. I'm using a Viesa here, which is like criminally, you know, underdeveloped and basically doesn't have a bunch of decent mods on it, anything like that. And I'm essentially letting the gun do most of the talking for me. But as you can see, the damage is fairly decent, and I'm basically trapping this poor dude in the middle there, and essentially everything is getting shot around him and so on. And it becomes a very good area denial weapon. As mentioned, I think this weapon truly excels when it comes to controlling areas, and I think it's going to make the leveling process for the Descendants, which basically don't have access to great mobbing abilities, at the least not at the beginning, without their Transcendent mods or without an insane amount of leveling being pumped into them. It's going to make those characters a lot easier to level, and all that you need to gain, let's say, a decent-ish effort here is just a base level King's Guard lance, because the point is that you already have access to all 3 lances right at the beginning. Your radiuses will just not be as big as they are in the examples that you've seen here now, but that's still very much manageable with 3 lances. Last but certainly not least, certain Descendants benefit even more from using King's Guard lance than others do, and these are the kinds of Descendants that also have abilities that snapshot damage onto their weapons. A very good example of this, it's not just Sharon, but Sharon is probably the best one here, and I haven't found another Descendant that benefits quite as much, or rather that King's Guard lance benefits quite from as much as Sharon. So Sharon has an ability called Active Camouflage, and it's basically like a cloak, and then when you come out of this cloak, it increases your damage by like 100%, as you can see here on the tooltip. However, you can, for example, put Overcharged Edge on there, and that's going to further on augment it by additional damage for basically a certain point, a certain amount of shield that you're going to sacrifice. So instead of like 100% extra, it's actually going to be 150% extra. So this gets snapshotted onto the turrets as well, and can be quite juicy. So just to demonstrate here, we're going to go ahead and cloak, and then we're going to drop. And you'll see now the damage is significantly higher than what we were seeing just now when I was using it on Viesa. So definitely certain Descendants are going to be better using the King's Guard lance if damage is the only thing that you are concerned with. Snapshot Descendants like Enzo, like Valby, like Sharon will definitely be able to just juice up the damage of the weapon of King's Guard lance significantly more than the Descendants who don't do this. But really, all things considered, this weapon, King's Guard lance, should be considered as a tool that you can use for your Descendants to essentially enable better leveling experiences for ones that don't have great mobbing capabilities, and then also the fact that you could potentially set up some really creative ways that you can block off certain areas of a level or of a void reactor like we saw in the footage earlier, and that will allow you to farm it very fast, and thereby you can basically get yourself a whole bunch of additional character XP as well as weapon proficiency for your King's Guard lance. Unfortunately, you can't have the lances out and switch to another gun because that'll actually erase your lances, but of course your secondary and third weapon actually do still get 30% of the weapon proficiency, which isn't a lot, but hey, beggars can't be choosers. That's it for the video. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you made it this far. Let me know in the comments down below if you've been enjoying King's Guard lance. It's been amazing to me that basically while using this weapon on the weekend, as I was starting to level it up on certain dungeons, I had players ask me, yo bro, what the fuck is that? What are those turrets that are coming out, since it wasn't well known by then, to today actually recording the last bit of footage and essentially seeing like all of the guys in a dungeon running with the King's Guard lance. So certainly the popularity has caught on, and it is actually hilarious seeing like a bunch of Descendants deploying these little turret hot zones everywhere, just essentially frying everything. It's actually pretty damn effective, especially for the sort of like objectives where you have to control certain areas and where you know exactly where the enemy spawn point is, because you can just put your turrets right on top of that. And let me tell you something, like 12 of these turrets on top of a boss fucking melts. Go ahead and try it out, hit your buddies up and give it a whirl. Other than that, it's just super important to me that you have a fantastic morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. Till next video, fucking cheers.